Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tim Grierson. I am a contributing editor at Backstage and the vice president of the Los Angeles Film Critics Association. It gives me great pleasure to be the host of this Q&A for Love and Mercy. And so without further ado, let's welcome two of the stars of this film, Paul Dano and Elizabeth Banks. So welcome, both of you. Congratulations on the movie. The first thing I wanted to ask about is, one of the things I love about having both of you here is that you both represent the two sections of the film. And so the first thing I wanted to ask about was there much conferring between the 60s Brian Wilson crew and the 80s? Did your director want to keep you guys separated, or was there sort of an integration process in terms of 60s versus 80s?
It was not integrated. Bill Pohlad, the director, they purposely shot the 60s section of the movie first, and they literally wrapped everybody, and then we had one day of crossover, and then we shot the 80s. It was like making two totally separate movies. Yeah. So they did all the 60s with the hair and the makeup and the production design and the actors and the color palette, and then they totally separated and broke, and then we did the 80s.
Which, you know, I thought at first was kind of a possibly insane choice to not have John and I meet or consult or be on the same page at all. But I think, but I mean, Bill had some kind of trust in us that if we just kind of walk towards our respective Brians, that we'd be okay, and that I think hopefully that the juxtaposition is something to lean into rather than to try to match, because he was quite different in the 60s than the 80s. He did kind of go into a black hole late 60s, early 70s, and he came out of it when Melinda came along, really. But so hopefully that added something, but by us never meeting until my last day and his first day. Yeah.
Because I'm curious for you, Paul, in terms of that, being told, like, oh, you're not going to meet the other actor or kind of confer, did you call Cusack? Did the two of you ever talk about, hey, I would like to at least kind of touch base? Was there any kind of conversation the two of you had about how you wanted to approach it?
No, I literally think it was basically like my last day and his first day that we met. But I did hear him playing Smile very loudly in his trailer. And, you know, we geeked out for a while about Brian's music. And I think that we both were obsessed with Smile and did feel that was somehow a gateway between the two, like somewhere in Smile is some kind of passing of the torch. And I wouldn't know how to, I don't even know if that's right or if I could explain it further, but there was something about both of our obsession with Smile that felt right, and like, okay, that's what connects us.
In terms of, you know, shooting the 60s and then doing the 80s, I'm assuming, though, when you both were given the script, you were given the full script, just not your own section. I'm curious, when you are doing a performance for one half of a film, more, I guess, for Paul first, in terms of seeing where Brian Wilson goes in the 80s, and that, of course, is the part that you're not going to play, did you feel that you needed to hint at what that version of Brian Wilson was going to be in your own performance?
No. I think that maybe, you know, towards the tail end of it, you see kind of where my Brian is, you know, is headed, and then really it ends up in bed, you know, and then eventually that person in bed becomes the Brian who is with Landy. So I think there was a long period of in between. And in earlier drafts of the script, there was a third Brian, which was the Brian in bed, which was a little bit, you know, experimental or something. I don't think he had much dialogue or anything. It was like just a presence that you still feel a little bit in the film. For me, it was nice to know where the story went just in terms of my own spirit and hope, because my character arc ends in a tough spot. You know, it's not fun when you don't get to live out the resurrection, you know, so kind of, you know, drop off, and it's like, okay, but to know that Melinda came along, that was nice to know.
Along those lines, Elizabeth, you know, most people, even if they don't know Brian Wilson personally, they know his music, they know what he looks like. Melinda is someone who's not as well known. Yeah. I'm curious, is that freeing in a certain way that, you know, because I imagine that for both with Paul and John Cusack, one of the questions that both of you get was, isn't it nerve-wracking to play someone who's so well known and so famous? For someone like her, is it a little easier just because there aren't dozens of books written about her and thousands of fans all over the world who know all of her music? Is that easier in any way in terms of playing a real person?
There's fewer people to disappoint, is what you're getting at. Yes, that's true. That's true. You know, but there's still the great responsibility of her. I mean, I've played a couple real people now, and who are alive, and you know, it's that essence, that person's essence that you want to get at, and so that's where I don't know, it wouldn't really matter to me what anyone else thought. It was all about if I did it right by her. And, you know, she's become such a great resource and presence in my own life, as really just being part of this movie, and knowing I can email her it's been very enriching for me as a person, and I feel very connected to Melinda. And so, yes, I wouldn't say it's easier. I felt a great responsibility to her and to Brian, to really, and a gratitude that they gave us their life, and so we better do a nice, do a nice job with it. I don't know, it was heavy. Yeah. It was heavy.
In terms of meeting her, how soon after reading the script did that happen? Did you take weeks and sort of prepare that character and then want to meet her? How did it work?
No, pretty much I had a couple meetings with Bill, and then I said, you know, when can I meet her? Because in my research, even when you read the biographies, I remember there was one biography that sort of talked about a moment that she was there behind the scenes, which is what she does. She's there behind the scenes in his life right now, every day, all the time. And then literally I couldn't find her again. You know, it was like she was just this little presence, a sentence here or there, and I couldn't find her again. And there's a couple videos of them sort of on Larry King and stuff, but I couldn't find her anywhere, you know? So I couldn't find this character until I met her. And then meeting her is really what hooked me in and compelled me forward and gave me so many amazing answers about how to do this thing.
So I think one of the things that's really powerful in the movie is that, of course, when they first meet, this does not seem like, oh, this is a love that's going to last, you know. In terms of the secret, in terms of what makes her tick with Brian, I'm curious in terms of talking to her and getting to know her, what do you think that is about their chemistry, how they work together?
Well, I'm really glad to hear you use the word chemistry, because that was really a big part of their first meeting, like it is with anyone who meets somebody. I think it's very rare that anyone meets somebody and goes, well, love at first sight, this is it. let me throw away everything and jump in feet first and pull this guy out from this guy. And I mean, it was like a big project. It ended up being a big project. All she had was that initial, that is all true. She sold him a Cadillac. That is how they met. And he walked in the dealership and told her a story about his brother dying. And she just said, I was meeting I'd never met anyone like him. And she'd been around a lot of blocks, and she'd had a lot of love and not such great experiences with men in her life, and had kind of given up on marriage and kids and all of those things. And then she met this open vessel of kindness and honesty, and who happened to be Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys. And, you know, she didn't know who he was when they met, and they really were connected. She told me on like a pheromone level, you know, like I met this guy and I kind of wanted to have sex with him. And that was the beginning of my interest, as it is for so many of us. Like it was so easy. It was like, oh, when she broke it down like that, I was like, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense. Okay, I get that.
Yeah. Well, it's such a great point because
Still one step at a time.
Yeah, because I think a lot of times, you know, for people who are watching movies, there may be a desire to intellectualize something where it is something. It's something as simple as he is attractive. I am attracted to him, and that does power a lot of relationships, especially at the beginning. But also with her and him, there is so much patience that she has to show, and there's so much compassion that she has to show for this man. I'm curious for you in terms of, was that an easy thing to do in terms of portraying somebody who has not infinite amounts of patience, but as someone who is willing to say, I care about this person, I want to help this person, I want to get him away from this other person who's destroying his life?
I mean, I can say about myself that I'm probably not that patient. This was a departure for me as a person. And it was that was a big part of my questioning of Melinda, you know, just like, why did you stay? I mean, this is, wow, there's so much baggage. And you know, she's so, first of all, they saved each other, you know, really as a two-way street. And the other thing that pulled me through the movie and really informed like my optimism about everything that happens to these two people is that they, you know, we don't get there in this film, but I've been to their home with their 5 kids and their 12 dogs, and their very happy, delightful home. And Gloria, the housekeeper, is still there. She's Grandma Gloria to their kids, their 5 kids. Like, they fucking won, guys. Like, they did it. Like, they did it. They're still together. They do this all the time. They talk to each other like teenagers, like hanging out with each other. It's so inspiring. You know, it's like, this was not some light fling. This was like 2 people who were deep people who got connected and dreamed about a life that they wanted to have with each other. And all they had to do was get rid of this guy, Landy. And then they could do it. And then they did it. Like, it's that's what pulled me through the movie, was knowing that was the ultimate outcome for them, that he's still alive and he's still playing music every day, and he's got this music room in his house with the piano and the whole, it's just, and they provided that for each other.
And with Paul, you know, you in some ways you have, I think for a lot of people who are Beach Boys fans like myself, you have kind of one of the great dream roles that you not only get to play Brian Wilson, but you get to, you know, be in there making Pet Sounds essentially. And I've read interviews that you've given in the past about, you know, that you knew Pet Sounds. Obviously, you knew the Beach Boys music, but something specifically that you mentioned, I wanted to ask you about. In one interview, you had said that it was actually playing or learning to play Brian Wilson's music that in some ways helped you to understand him as a person, as a character. I'm assuming that wasn't taken out of context, and if so, I'd love to know more about the process of understanding his music even before understanding him as a person.
Yeah, I think I said that, and I think that's true. I think Brian, you know, he is his music. It's one of those things when you see him sit down at the piano or play, it's like the person change, you know, it's like the shoulders drop or something. They're like they're centered. And I felt as well from the script, it was interesting because there was stuff about his home life, right, or home, the idea of home, his brothers and his father, who were actually, or his cousin, Mike Love, and his father, which were, you know, a tough presence in his life. And so to me, the studio was home in the film, and his real home was not that. So it felt like just the music and the studio for my character was the center. So I think that's just where I tried to start. So really, I had so many hours of audio stuff from their vaults, from Brian in the studio working with those musicians. It was amazing. It was so fun to listen to, and then learning to play the piano a bit and learn to sing the songs and literally kind of, you put them in you, you literally sing them, and it reverberates through your body, and you kind of hope that something is, happening, and I think that's a good place to start, because he is such a sort of open, honest, raw, sensitive, vulnerable person, and that was my first beat. Yeah.
I'm assuming from the beginning the idea was that you were going to actually be singing these songs, or at least part of these songs are actually your voice. Is that correct in the movie?
Yeah, there's two scenes where I'm just like alone at the piano, God Only Knows and Surf's Up, and those were, I played and sang them just live on set, and that's what they used. And then in the studio, it often starts with me, and then as the song builds and you see the construction of the song, it transitions to the song that we might know. And Bill did an excellent job with that. I mean, he really set us up for success in that studio. We had two 60mm cameras and real musicians. We did everything live. It was so fun. It was so alive. We were in the studio that Brian actually recorded Pet Sounds in back in 1965. Like, it was crazy. It was so cool. So yeah.
Well, my question specifically was, singing. How is your singing voice? How do you feel? How did you feel going into knowing that you were going to be performing this stuff? Not just having a good singing voice, but maybe perhaps sounding like Brian in terms of singing. How did that work?
Yeah, that was, I thought I could, sing enough to do it, and I wanted to, or I wanted to at least attempt to. I wanted to have the chance to. And Bill said, okay, and he had never heard me sing, and I was like, this guy's crazy. And so I started working with someone in New York, and just Brian's range is really big. So I just, did voice lessons for like probably 5 months just to try to stretch out just a little, and then, I didn't want to over worry about sounding exactly like him. I felt like all those external things felt like the last, like just the icing on the cake because of Brian's sort of openness. I didn't want to, get tempted towards mimicry or something. So when I sang, I wanted to, but I did try, to kind of lean towards that or walk towards it and learn, how my voice is different than his, and I speak more from the back of my throat. He speaks more from the front, and you sort of learn to, for speaking and singing, just, slowly shift your own thing towards it, which is really cool. And so, I was really nervous about it. I was terrified. But it was also so fun, and it gave me a lot of joy. It's like I remembered why kids sing every day. Yeah. Like, kids sing, like, all the time. And I sang every day for, 6, 7, 8 months, and that felt so good. Yeah.
This question is actually for both of you. One of the things I think is also interesting about this movie is that you have a filmmaker who is primarily a producer. Sometimes actors become directors, and also sometimes writers become directors, but you often don't see producers becoming directors. The filmmaker has produced things like Tree of Life and 12 Years a Slave. I'm curious in terms of him as a director, working with the two of you. Obviously, both of you work with lots of different directors. Was there anything sort of specifically different about the fact that this was somebody who was primarily a producer stepping into the director's chair?
No, not at all. And to his credit, Bill is a director. I mean, I think he made really ballsy choices. Like, there's stuff in the film that is hard to do and challenging and risky. And he certainly lived up to his word in terms of what he wanted to try to accomplish, and really set all of us up for success, I feel like. And he's super generous and collaborative and creative, and it didn't feel like there was a business mind or something behind the camera. There was no sense of that, I think, and I think he loved it, and I think he did a great job. Yeah.
With biopics, one of the things you're telling the story of a life, obviously. But often it's a question of what's the angle or the perspective. In terms of when you were first given the script and first started to talk to Bill about this, was there conversations about, we don't just want to do a story about Brian Wilson, we want to do it from this angle or from this perspective? I'm curious what those conversations were like at the very beginning for the two of you.
I mean, I think, Bill and Oren Moverman, Oren Moverman wrote the script, and Bill was definitely a big part of that, just in terms, and Oren suggested that Bill directed. Bill was developing it, I believe,
Yeah.
and it could have been something that Oren maybe directed, and I think Oren was like, hey man, you're really helping to shape this, you've got something, and I loved, but was also, felt it was a risk, the idea of just, let's live in 2 points in this person's life really intensely, rather than birth to present day, because I feel like the experience is actually a lot bigger, because you are experiencing it with them, rather than just being given, little pieces. So I really loved the idea of that. What else?
Yeah, I think we were not, there was never, every conversation I had, we never shied away from mental illness. Mm-hmm. That this is an everyday presence in Brian's life, and that one of the ways, weirdly, interestingly, to talk about it was to make a story that is very fragmented and, has all these 2 different actors and 2 different characters, and it felt like a way into his disease that also helped tell the story and helped all of it. I mean, it's just a really interesting, complete way to make a biopic, about someone with this specific situation.
And, with Paul, playing someone who has, mental illness, finding that line, I guess, in terms of knowing what's too much or what's too theatrical or showy, was that something that you had to kind of figure out on your own in terms of kind of mapping that for Brian and sort of knowing where things started to kind of go wrong for him sort of mentally?
Yeah, I don't think I ever, I think, yeah, it's certainly something that's easy to be tempted to play the idea of it, right? If somebody's having trouble with their mind or I felt really, one thing I learned, I think, a little bit about acting through this was, I felt so protective of Brian, really, I think we all really love him. And you realize that, oh yeah, like, if you're not feeling well, like, usually you don't want to, so like, actually the biggest part of my job in those scenes was to try and fight against those things, rather than to be playing them. Does that make any sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it's almost sort of like the old acting rule about if you're going to play drunk, don't sort of work against it sort of thing,
Yes.
like that?
Yeah, exactly. So, you kind of have to, you do have to do your research and sort of know what it is, but you also have to find just where it lives in you and how to ground it. So like any other scene, it feels like it's really happening, and then don't worry about if it's too theatrical or what, and hopefully build, you working with people you trust, and you know that somebody has your back if you do cross the line.
Elizabeth, playing Melinda, one of the things I'm very struck by, and that's not a first half and second half, because obviously it's interwoven, but very much you are the main character in a lot of ways in the 80s segment. I'd love, if you could, to talk a little bit about her sort of journey, because I feel like, for me as an audience member, she starts off as somebody who doesn't necessarily want to sign on for what she's going to be signing on for. And we talked before about the attraction, and I get that, of course, but the process of kind of, it seems like she sort of grows as a person and becomes stronger by kind of having to stand up for him and to defend him against this person. In terms of that journey, I'd love to hear you kind of talk about what that was like in terms of developing it.
there's the scene towards the end when Landy comes to the dealership after he gets and I serve him. That's like an appropriation of a few different things that happen in real life. Certain things were very true to, and I'm 99% sure that on the day that Landy was served, Melinda did not see him. However, it really felt. But then they were in lawsuits for years, and it was a whole thing. So they did, have this head-to-head. So we wanted to figure out a way for the two of them to meet. Anyway, this is all to say that we shot that scene just because the car dealership was available those 2 days, the first 2 days of the shoot for me. And so I showed up, and it was like, you're going to stand behind this door, and Paul Giamatti is going to scream at you all day long, and it's going to be great. And he's going to not just scream at you, but he's going to accuse you of everything you're accusing him of, which is using Brian, and you don't really fucking love him, and who do you think you are? And I ultimately was so grateful that I had to stand there and work through all of those motivations for Melinda, like day 2. And really sort of answer for myself those questions while I was sitting there. Because that is, that really was sort of the basis of, what drew, what propelled her through the movie. And to really go, to open that door and go, no, I do love him. Like, I have his best interest at heart. And I don't even need him to ever talk to me again. I just want to know that he's not with you. And that, I hope you all someday get to meet the wonderful Melinda, because she's fantastic. And she really, in no uncertain terms, she hated Eugene Landy with a passion. Brian, who's this lovely, open, amazing, warm vessel, will tell you there was good with the bad. And he won't hold the grudge, and he'll tell you Landy got him out of bed, and because he was crazy, but it wasn't that crazy, right? It got out of control and out of his control, but there were good things about Landy. And whereas Melinda, by the time she showed up, she just felt he was pure evil. And so there was all of the moments that I got to be with John Cusack and learn about each other and let him play me music and talk about soup and fall in love and be sexually attracted to him and want to know more about him every time I met him, want to be more and more interested, and also then see this other thing that was happening to him that I knew was not good for him and all of that. And then there was a moment it wasn't quite in the script, but Bill and I talked a lot about like when I could transition over into just hating Landy so much that I just, the goal became beating Landy. Yeah. And that, hopefully there's just a nice nuanced fall over into, yeah, I really love this guy, but it doesn't matter because I'm never gonna get to be with this guy unless I get this guy out from underneath Eugene Landy. And so, and I can tell, I know that Melinda's a really competitive person and a really fierce advocate, so it felt really right to me that at a certain point I could just be all about wanting to beat Landy. Yeah. And so that's kind of, I don't know, that's how I developed the character. It was like love, 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 and then also hate, hate, hate for that guy. I love this guy, I hate that guy. Okay, we'll figure this out.
Elizabeth, one of the questions we had in advance that someone wanted me to ask you is, for many actors, there's always the worry about being typecast as a certain type of person, and you have very much succeeded in not having that as a problem, because whether it's the Hunger Games movies or something like this, or your great performance in W as Laura Bush, you've done all these different types of things, obviously 30 Rock and things like that. Was that an active choice of, I want to keep trying different types of things to avoid typecasting? Did all these different types of things just come your way and you wanted to go for it? How has that happened for you, I guess?
Well, this is a room of actors, right? You guys are mostly actors, right? I just took the jobs they gave me. I mean, I said no to certain things, you know, sure, you can, that's your only power as an actor coming up, is to say no. But so, and then I just said, when someone offered me something, I said yes a lot. Because I like paying my bills and feeding my children and nice dresses. And I love the work, so I really just love the work. And I do feel very, very fortunate. I've had a really fun and weird career. But there is no, I find it so interesting when people ask about your sort of grand plan, as if like, I mean, I don't know, maybe Jen Lawrence can have a grand plan, which is just like, the minute you're Katniss, then just do whatever the fuck you want. Like, work with everybody, just go like, I'd like to work with you. And the guy goes, all right, well, come over. Yeah, you're gonna work with me then, because you are the one in control. I was never the one in control for a very long time. So I had no plan. I did whatever I could get, basically. It's like all of you.
Paul, for you, another question from the audience in terms of, and maybe this is the same answer, but choices in terms of roles turned down, roles picked. Has there been for you any sort of plan or thought about how you want to sort of conduct your career, or what types of things you are definitely going to say no to?
Yes and no. I mean, I totally agree. You just can't, like, I mean, I wish. It's so hard, you know, it's somebody else wrote it, somebody else cuts it. I mean, really, it's hard. Like, it can be heartbreaking. It can, you know, and I mean, the amount of rejection, you know, is unbelievable. I mean, how many, you know, so if you are fortunate and you know, it is nice when you feel like, oh, okay, wait, I can think about this. You know, it is kind of, but it's also like a responsibility, and you know, because I feel like now I can say more about like who I am or something in a weird way through my work, you know. But I don't know. I mean, I'm definitely like, I guess I'm learning what makes me happy, essentially, you know, and so I do know that, you know, it's great if I can work on material that automatically puts a fire in my belly. I mean, that's what I would choose to do if I can. Right. You know, that feels great, and I really like the collaborative elements of it. So I really love who is the director and how do we. You know, I like being a part of it. You know, I like feeling, you know, in there and being deep in it, and then, you know, if you can find stuff that challenges you so you can learn, you know. Yeah.
You know, along those lines you were saying before about with Brian Wilson, that his music is so much a part of him, and sort of learning the music is in some ways learning. What you were saying just now made me sort of think about that. Now you have a little bit of a body of work in terms of your roles. Do you feel, and maybe this is for both of you, do you feel like that the roles that you've been in are expressions in some ways of who you are in terms of the things that you care about or are interested in, as opposed to being asked questions about yourselves in your personal lives? Say the work in some ways speaks for what I care about, what I'm interested in, challenges, things like that.
I shouldn't have said that. I feel like I just dug a hole that I'm going to have to, because I don't know what my stuff says about me. Yeah.
Get beat up a lot. I make fun of him because he gets beat up in a lot of his movies. He just gets the shit kicked out of him all the time. Right? Yeah, he knows. He's like, yep, 12 years a slave.
Yeah. Well, that's, I don't know. I feel like that 12 Years a Slave would be an example of something where you're, okay, I get to be a part of a story in a film that I think has value, rather than is the character a reflection of me? Right. You know, so that's actually a choice. Okay. All right.
Everyone in the room is so relieved to hear that.
But that's a choice. So if that's a choice, that's a choice. That's like, ooh, that person's asking me to do that. And that, my first impulse is definitely, I don't want to, for sure, without question, no. But then there's something about the people and the story, and where I go, okay, is this worth the cost of doing that to contribute to this film or this story? And in that case, the answer was yes. It felt like it was, even though it was an ugly character. This certainly feels more personal in some ways, because I really believe in what Brian has to give, and I play Brian. So, like, to try to carry that spirit through me, it felt really good. I learned a lot and took away a lot from doing it. And, I don't know if I'm the person who can say it's a good movie, but I feel like there's goodness in the movie. Like, I feel like there's goodness in Brian and the idea of love and mercy, and that he wanted to make music that could help people smile and help them heal, even though he went through so much. That's a spirit that, I want out there. And in that way, it does, it feels, great.
Elizabeth and Paul, thank you very much. And by the way, it is a good movie, so I can tell you. Congratulations.
Thank you
Thank you very
guys.
much. Thank you.